And she let me leave the house with my best girlfriend from school for the first time. She let me do a normal kid thing. First time she ever did it. And she dropped us off at the mall. And I was so proud to be out of the house and away from her and to be with my friend at the mall with all the other kids. Because all the kids went to the mall every weekend. I was never allowed to go anywhere because the abuse was more than physical. And she held me captive like I held Eric captive. And I wasn't allowed to do anything but whatever she said. And part of what she said was that I couldn't go outside. I couldn't play on the playground as a kid. I couldn't go in with my friends. I couldn't do fucking anything. And I had to sit in that house and just wait for her to come home, find something wrong with me, and beat me for nothing. And this happened every day of my life, every fucking day, because this is a lifestyle. It's not a thing that just fucking happens. And I had this friend, and her mother was a social worker. This shit right here is a dope ass story. Listen to me. My best friend Megan's mother was a social worker, and she made my mother feel comfortable with letting me go out with her daughter to the mall. Thank you, social worker, for talking my mom into letting me leave the house. This is awesome. So Megan and I go to the mall. We bump into some friends of hers. Megan's a wild child. I didn't know. I've never been out before, so we get in the car with these friends, and no one sees me for 3 days. I am kidnapped, I am being raped, I am being held hostage in a Motel 6 that we broke into for 3 days. I am being repeatedly raped by grown men. They're all over 18. I'm 13 years old. Megan also. Finally, we escaped. We literally had to escape. We're talking running away, hiding under cars. It was like the movie Taken. Like, we're under a car, we see these footsteps coming to get us. We have to be quiet, and hope that they don't see us under this car and drag us out. And after 3 days, we escaped after being brutally raped and tied up by these friends of hers. And this is my life, by the way. I'm 13 years old at this point. All this shit's already happened to me. And being held at gunpoint, the whole thing. It's a whole fucking movie. And finally, there's no cell phones because it's like the 80s or something, and early 90s, whatever it was, and there's no cell phone. So we finally get ourselves to a payphone, call her mother, the social worker, to come get us, and she does. She takes me home to my mother. My mother hasn't seen me in 3 days. I am covered in scratches and bites and hickeys and ugly things from this rape. And I was a virgin, of course, before this happened. So this was my first sexual experience. So I'm damaged, so damaged at this point. And my mother opens the door, and my best friend stands there with her mother, the social worker. My mother grabs me. She doesn't freaking say a word. And she grabs me by my hair, and she immediately throws me to the floor, and she starts punching and kicking, and she just starts kicking my ass. And all I can remember her saying is, "You smell like sex. You whore, you smell like sex." And I never had a chance to tell her how these guys took us and tied us up and raped us. And I never had a chance to say anything. And then she threw me in a tub of scalding hot water. And so any evidence was washed away, and she scrubbed my whole body because I smelled like sex, which usually happens after you get raped for 3 days. But I didn't have a chance to voice that. And I shut down. I shut completely down. Because I was getting the abuse from all sides. But let me tell you about the social worker. She sat there and she watched me be beaten and she never stopped my mother. The door was open, they stood in the doorway, and they watched my mother. She watched my mother pound into me. And I was on the floor in a fetal position, and my mother was kicking me. And this social worker just watched. And she said and did nothing. They didn't report my mother the next day, nothing. She just left me there. And I remember screaming, help me, help me, help me. And nobody helped me. Not that day, not since I left my grandmother's house. Nobody helped me. And I stayed with this woman for like 2 more years of my life, to the point where, of course, naturally, I start running away. So from 13 to 15, I was gone. I'd be gone for months. And any social worker I would come in contact with would say, well, this is a troubled teen. What's wrong with this teen? She's troubled. What's wrong with her? You're acting up. You're fucking up. You're not going to school. You're skipping school. You're out here living in the street, and you have a nice home with a mother and 2 sisters and fresh food and clean clothes. And what's wrong with you? Why won't you just act right? And no one ever stopped to ask a fucking question. What happened? What happened? Who did what to you? And it's a question I've learned to ask people as I am mentoring and counseling. I ask them, what's wrong with you? And I get this look, because it was defensive, like, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm doing it. What has happened? Who touched you the wrong way? Who fought you? Who said something or did something to you that changed you forever, that made you who you are today? Who has done this to you? Because you're not some wayward person. You're not some miscellaneous lost soul that sprung out of nowhere, out of direction. Someone taught you everything you know, and who has taught you to be this way? Abuse is not a thing that just happens. It is literally the way people are living. It is 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years deep. My mother was abused. Her mother was abused. Everybody around me had been abused before I even got here. And so that was their language. And as my mother was teaching me how to say please and yes and thank you and no, she was also teaching me how to be abused, because that's what she had been taught. This is not something that just happens in an elevator, or because I'm having a bad day, or I charged you, or I do. That's not how it works. This thing right here is a tree, and these roots are deep, and as you're going into your fields, you have to remember that this is not an incident. This is a history. And it starts with a little girl who's 5 years old, who was beaten within an inch of her life by her mother, so that by the time she gets to a man, when he beats her, it's not weird. It's not strange. It's not unusual. It doesn't even fucking hurt. Because her mother did it. The person who brought her here, the person who fed her, clothed her, the person who is supposed to and does teach her who she's supposed to be the rest of her life, her mother did it. Her father did it. You think when women have issues with men, it starts with you? I teach my son, treat every woman as if she is your mother, because she probably is.